Hi, I'm Jan Kowalski with Slate I Incorporated, and tonight I'm joined by Rebecca Rashid Faroki. I hope I said that right, did I? From the Chicago Volunteer Legal Services. And this is a live interactive show on CAN TV Channel 21. We're also streaming online at cantv.org/hotline. And tonight we're going to be discussing issues as to immigration policy changes in America. And for the next 25 minutes, you are welcome to participate by calling in with questions, comments, or concerns relating to our topic tonight. And you can call the number at the bottom of your screen with any questions or comments. And Green Slate I Incorporated is a non-for-profit entity, and they're designed to assist prisoners with re-entry. They also have programs for feeding the families of Inglewood and community service projects for the Circuit Court of Cook County. And on your screen you can see their website, their email address, and their phone number. And I'm Jan Kowalski. And for a lot of people it's a difficult name if you're not Polish. It is. I thought your name was bad. Mine's equally bad. And that's Kowalski, Kowalski. And to help people remember my name, I've got this cute little device here. Let me show you this picture in a second. There's my little guy. There is the koala, and he is on his skis because my name is Kowalski. Some people might think that my name is Kawasaki, as in the motorcycle, but it's really not. And also to help you remember my name, last but not least, I am 100% qualified because I am Jan Kowalski. And let me introduce you to Rebecca. Rebecca, can you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself?
Sure, Jan. Thank you for having me. My name is Rebecca Rashid Faroki. I don't have any special tricks for remembering my name, but I'm the director of the Guardian Ad Litem program for minors at Chicago Volunteer Legal Services, also known as CVLS.
And tonight we're going to be discussing immigration concerns?
Correct. So I was planning to talk a little bit about guardianship in general, and then more specifically about guardianship as a potential safety plan for immigrants who might fear detention or deportation.
All right, let's jump right into it, Rebecca. And of course, this is a live interactive show. If you want to call, please call the number at your screen. This is a live interactive show. We'll try to get to all your comments and questions. Rebecca, back to you.
Sure, Jan. So as I mentioned, I'm an attorney at Chicago Volunteer Legal Services. CVLS is a nonprofit organization that provides low-income legal services to families who can't afford a private attorney. So we do everything on the civil side, including a lot of family law. Obviously, we do a lot of guardianship work, bankruptcies, housing issues, and adoptions, name changes, and pretty much everything on the civil side. We don't do any criminal law, but we do all sorts of cases at the Daily Center for people in Cook County who are involved in legal matters. And so I'm, as I mentioned, I'm the director of the Guardian Ad Litem program for minors. And in this program, we get appointed by the probate court on about 200 cases a year in which we serve as the Guardian Ad Litem for children. So that's anybody under the age of 18. We represent the best interests of the minors. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about three different types of guardianships that exist in the state of Illinois for minor children.
You ready for the slide?
Sure, yeah. So guardianship is a legal vehicle that allows someone to step into the shoes of a parent, and it gives them the legal authority to make day-to-day decisions on behalf of a child. And as I mentioned, there are three main types of guardianship in Illinois, and these are listed here from the most official or the most complete to the most flexible or the least formalized. So the first one is plenary guardianship. Plenary guardianship is basically a full guardianship, and it's the type of guardianship that most people are familiar with. This is when someone is taking care of a child full-time, and this is a court-ordered guardianship that's effective immediately. So if there's, for example, a grandmother or an aunt who's taking care of a child full-time and they need decision-making abilities for that kid, then they can go before the court and petition for what's called plenary guardianship. It's effective now. And so in terms of the immigration context, this is really not the best vehicle for undocumented parents or those who fear detention or deportation to use, because this is something that will give someone full authority over children immediately. However, the other two types of guardianship are relevant to the immigrant population in terms of fears of detention. The first is standby guardianship. So this is also court-ordered, but this is sort of a what-if scenario. So if someone is fearing detention or deportation or even hospitalization or some other type of incapacity, they can appoint through the court a standby guardian. They must file a petition in court. They must go before the judge and ask that a standby guardian be appointed by the judge. And then the final one, and the one that we're going to focus on tonight, is called short-term guardianship. And so this is the only one of the three that doesn't require going to court. This is a private party document that can be executed by two individuals at any time. And the parents can use a short-term guardianship to appoint a guardian, and that can take effect upon a given event. So it can be if someone is incarcerated, or if they're about to be hospitalized, or for example, if they're in the military and are about to serve active duty, they can execute a short-term guardianship that names another individual as the guardian of their children. It's a very flexible document. As I mentioned, a parent can execute this document at any time, and it can last for a period of up to 1 year, at which point it can be renewed. Other things to mention about this document is that not everybody needs one right now. So a lot of people are fearing the recent executive orders and have fears of potential deportation or detention. And this document can be done at any time. So if somebody is detained, most likely there is going to be some time before they are actually deported. And so they could execute this document from detention if necessary. Another thing that I want to emphasize is that notarization is really not required for this document under the law. So we've seen a lot of examples in the news of notaries taking advantage of people and charging exorbitant amounts of money to get these documents notarized. I've heard of people charging $200 to notarize these documents. But legally, all you need are 2 witnesses. So you don't need to have the document notarized at all, and people should really not be paying large fees for notaries to do these documents for them.
Do you have a slide on that one?
I don't have a slide for that. I'm sorry. But I do have a slide that shows the legal requirements to be a guardian in Illinois, if you want to put that one on the screen.
Sure. What do you need?
Right there. It's requirements for becoming a court-ordered guardian. And so this is supposed to be applicable to all 3 types of guardianship. So even if you're appointing someone through the the short-term guardianship form, that's the private party form, you should still consider whether this person is eligible to be a guardian under Illinois law. They must be an adult, so they have to be 18 years or older. They need to be a resident of the United States. The person petitioning for guardianship or becoming the guardian cannot have been adjudicated a disabled adult. And this means under the Illinois courts, so it's not the same as being a disabled for the purposes of, for example, Social Security. They need to not have a felony conviction. This is not a hard and fast rule. The judge can still make a best interest determination. So if someone has a felony conviction but the judge determines them still to be an appropriate caretaker for the child, then the judge can make that decision based on the best interest of the kid. But it definitely cannot be a felony conviction involving harm to a child. And then the last issue to note is that they must have legal immigration status, and this has a question mark because the law simply requires that someone be a resident of the United States, as it shows above. And some judges are interpreting this to mean that you need to be a citizen or a legal permanent resident, and other judges interpret it to mean that you simply have to live in the United States. So at the moment in Cook County, undocumented petitioners are currently unable to obtain guardianship of a minor.
So how does someone put into place the short-term guardianship if they're concerned about being deported or detained?
Sure. So the short-term guardianship is a form that any attorney can help you fill out. You don't have to have an attorney, but it's always advisable to have an attorney and to get an attorney's recommendation when you fill out this form. It can be executed at any time. As I mentioned, it's a relatively simple form that contains statutory language. And so there are a couple of different ways to do this. There are a number of clinics throughout the city. Various legal service organizations, including CVLS, are hosting clinics to help people address this issue and to help people fill out this form. And you can also fill it out online. So there's a website called Illinois Legal Aid Online. And they have the fillable forms in English and in Spanish that people can access from any computer, from a library, from home. And it makes it very simple because they have a questionnaire that you fill out, answering the question of who is the child and who did they live with, and then it will generate the appropriate legal form that you can print and then have signed by your witnesses.
All right, so can you tell me a little bit more about short-term guardianship, Rebecca?
Sure. So there are a few more things to note. It's important for people to think about appointing someone that they trust. So this is the same with anytime you're going to grant legal rights to one person or another. You need to make sure that you are thinking about who you're appointing to take care of your children.
Mine was great.
This is okay. I'm just, yeah. I think this is on a different one, but it's okay.
All right, go back to
Oh, well, we can talk about this. Okay. So I mentioned that it's a private.
That's great.
I mentioned that it's a private party document that's just between two individuals. There's no court involvement required, so this is the one of the three that doesn't require you going to court and appearing before a judge. It can be created or revoked at any time by either parent. So this is really important to remember, that a short-term guardianship can't be used to avoid the custody rights of the other parent. So, for example, if a mother is living in Chicago and she's caring for her children and she wants to appoint her sister, for example, as the short-term guardian if she's deported, but the father maybe lives in the United States and perhaps he hasn't been involved in the lives of the children, she can appoint her sister as the short-term guardian, but if she were to get deported, if the father shows up and says, I'd like to have my children back, his rights are going to be superior to that of the sister.
Well, let me ask you a question about that. Suppose dad is in Mexico and mom's in the United States and for whatever reason she's detained. Then father would have to come from Mexico to contest this?
He would, yeah, or I think he would have to hire an attorney in Illinois to possibly contest it, yes. Another thing to note is that, so I have this as the next point, it can be signed, oh no, it's okay. It can be signed by the other parent or by the appointed guardian at a later date. So for example, a mother or a father can execute this document at any time, and then the other parent can sign it later. They don't have to be right there with that person when they're signing, and the person accepting guardianship of the children can also sign it later. So not everyone has to be together. The other thing to note is that short-term guardianship, the benefits are that it's very flexible and can be done at any time, can be revoked at any time, but it also may not always be enforceable. So we may start to see issues with these short-term guardianship forms. For example, people trying to get on a plane with these children if all they have is a short-term guardianship over them, or authorizing serious medical procedures, enrolling children in school, things like that. They should be given the full weight of a regular guardianship under Illinois law, but we see that, it's on a case-by-case basis.
Well, Rebecca, in your experience, have schools not honored this short-term guardianship, or for the most part, have they?
We found for the most part that in Cook County, schools are pretty good about honoring a short-term guardianship. A lot of schools in Illinois are familiar with this form. They've seen it before. They've dealt with this. They have populations who are under guardianships. But we've had more issues in suburban Cook County and in some of the suburbs generally. But really, it's on a case-by-case basis.
And this form can be executed anywhere at any time? In other words, if I'm already detained in federal custody, I can execute this form?
Yes, as long as you have two credible witnesses there to sign the form with you, you can do it at any time.
And who should I select as witnesses, assuming I can select?
Well, your guess is as good as mine, but credible witnesses, I assume, means someone over the age of 18 who has legal capacity to serve as a witness.
But if you were to give a preference, who would be your first preference to be the witness? And I'm assuming the witness cannot be the guardian.
No, the witness can't be the parent or the guardian. It should be someone else who's an adult and who has mental capacity to sign something like this. So another family member or a friend or a neighbor, or if you were incarcerated, maybe two people who are employees of that facility.
Does the guardian have to speak English?
No, so the guardianship form is also available online in Spanish, and if you attend some of the legal clinics that will be held in the near future, they should also have the forms available in Spanish.
All right, save that thought, Rebecca. Reminder, you are watching Green Slate I Incorporated live on CAN TV channel 21 and cantv.org/hotline. In today's discussion, we're talking about guardianships and planning for changes in America's immigration policy. And I have Rebecca here with me from the Chicago Volunteer Legal Services joining us tonight. And this is a live interactive call-in show, and you could join the conversation by calling the number at your screen, which is 312-738-1060. And back to you, Rebecca.
Sure. So I'd like to share some information on how people can go about obtaining guardianships. I have some information on this, if you'd like to put that up on the screen.
I'm getting good at the screen.
So here you can see, how does a person acquire guardianship? So I mentioned that there are three types of guardianship. Plenary, which is the most full and complete guardianship that becomes effective immediately, and then standby guardianship, which is sort of the what-if scenario. Both of those two have to be entered by a judge and can only be revoked by a judge. And so all of these cases are heard in Cook County at the Daly Center. Just so people know, they used to hear these cases in Bridgeview, and they will no longer be having minor guardianship cases in the Bridgeview courthouse. So from now on, any new filings for minor guardianships need to be filed at the Daly Center downtown. And so anyone, regardless of their income, can get assistance with filing a plenary or a standby petition at the Guardianship Assistance Desk for Minors. This is a Cook County help desk at 69 West Washington on the 10th floor. And the number is there on the screen. It's 312-603-0135. It's by appointment only, so anyone seeking the assistance of the help desk should call that number for an appointment. And as I mentioned, they will help anyone, regardless of their income, who's looking to file a guardianship for a minor child.
Well, let me ask you, if I'm going to court, do I have to be a legal citizen to go to court to be appointed a plenary or a standby guardian?
That's a really good question, Jan. The law states that someone seeking guardianship of a child needs to be a resident of the state of Illinois. And it says resident with a lowercase r. And it's sort of on a case-by-case basis, depending on whatever judge is sitting in that courtroom. But at present, you need to have legal status in the United States to be the guardian of a minor. And I am interpreting legal status to mean refugee status, perhaps DACA, although there's sort of a question mark on this issue. I've never seen a petition by a DACA myself, and so someone with DACA, so I'm not sure.
Bear with me. What is a DACA? I'm not familiar with that term.
DACA is
Department of something?
No. It's Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and it's a temporary legal authorization and employment authorization for people who have been in the U.S. for a long time and went to school here. So basically the people we know as dreamers, most of them are under DACA status. And so it's usually people who have gone all the way through school here, and this is really the only home that they remember, and they've been given authorization to remain in the United States. There's sort of a question mark as to whether the current president will, do anything with that or change that legislation, but I would consider that to be legal status in the U.S., as well as a lawful permanent resident or certainly a U.S. citizen.
Well, if I have to go to court to seek a plenary or standby guardian, do I have to be able to speak English?
No, you don't. The court has interpreters for basically any language at no cost to you. And so when you file your petition, if you speak a language other than English, you should just make sure that you tell the clerk in the courtroom that you will need an interpreter for that day, and they will arrange it free of cost.
And is there a cost for filing this?
There is a cost for filing a guardianship petition, but if you are low income, that cost can be waived. You simply fill out a form at the courthouse explaining what your income is, and you may be eligible for a fee waiver if you can't afford the cost of filing.
Fantastic. What other forms of guardianship are there again?
So there are three main types of guardianship. One is a plenary guardianship. So that's a standard full-on guardianship where, for example, if I have another child in my care and I'm taking care of this child on a day-to-day basis, making all decisions for that kid, I need a plenary guardianship of that kid. And the second type is a standby guardianship. So this is also entered by the court, and this is for a what-if scenario. So if I, for example, know that perhaps I'm dying or I'm going to be hospitalized soon, or I know that for a fact I'm going to be detained or deported in the near future, I might want to set up a much more official standby guardianship through the court to make arrangements for my children. The standby guardianship will take effect immediately upon the incapacity or the unavailability of the parent. And then that person who's been appointed by the court as the standby guardian will have 60 days to come before the court and petition for plenary guardianship. So they'll need to essentially bump up their guardianship from standby to plenary guardian within that time frame.
Let me ask you about revocation. What happens if I put into place one of these guardianships, for instance, the short-term one, the more informal one? How do I revoke that in case that I'm released from detention?
Sure. The beauty of the standby guardianship is that, or I'm sorry, the short-term guardianship is that it can be implemented and it can be revoked at any time. So it's a very flexible document. You can write the the short-term guardianship to take effect upon the occurrence of a given event, so deportation or detention, for example, and then it can also be revoked at any time by either parent. So if I decide that I'm no longer fearing deportation or detention, or I simply want to name somebody else as the short-term guardian of my child, I can revoke it at any time.
Fantastic. What else can you tell us about short-term guardianships? Are there any clinics coming up?
Yes, Chicago Volunteer Legal Services, where I work, is going to host a second clinic. So we had one a few weeks ago, and it was very successful. We had a lot of people show up, and we helped a lot of people put together a short-term guardianship for their children.
Is that the one I was at?
Yes. Thank you for coming. The next one is going to be Sunday, April 23rd at Our Lady of Mercy Catholic Church on the northwest side. It's in Albany Park, and the address is, I think there's a slide for this.
Let me get going here.
The address is
here we go.
4432 North Troy
Write
in
this
Chicago.
down. Write this down.
And there's a phone number there. It's 773-588 2620 if anyone needs more information about the location of the church or parking. And again, it's going to be Sunday, April 23rd at 2:30 p.m. We're going to have a guardianship presentation covering much of what I've just covered now today, but in Spanish and in English, and it'll be a little bit more in-depth than what we've just discussed. And those will run simultaneously both at 2:30 in different locations in the church. So an English presentation and a Spanish presentation. And then there will be attorneys there to sit down with families starting at about 3:30, from about 3:30 to 5, to meet with the individual families and to help them execute a short-term guardianship in the appropriate situations.
Back to you. And again, this is a live interactive format, and you can call in with your comments, questions, and concerns about standby guardianships. And the number is appearing at your screen, 312-738-1060.
I should also note that anyone who is seeking assistance at one of these clinics, the upcoming one or ones that CVLS might publicize in the future, should plan to bring some documents with them. So it would be a good idea to bring a copy of your ID of the parent or the two parents looking to appoint a short-term guardian. You should bring a copy of the child's birth certificate or your children's birth certificate, and then you should also bring a copy of any current court orders that pertain to that child. So for example, if you're divorced and you have a divorce judgment that grants custody to one parent or the other, or if the child is currently under a guardianship, you should bring a copy of those court orders.
Well, once I execute this short-term guardianship, should I just put it in my safe deposit box, or what should I do with it?
It would be good to keep the original in a safe place and then to make a copy and to carry it with you. If the short-term guardian, if you fear that this may go into effect soon, or if it's already in effect, certainly if you are a short-term guardian of a child, you should keep that document with you at all times. But I would keep the original in a safe place at home.
Fantastic. And anything else you want to tell our viewers about short-term guardianships, Rebecca?
Sure. So another thing that I'd like to mention about standby guardianship. So standby is sort of that middle ground that I mentioned, the second category. If you go back to the original slide, so standby was the second category. This is also an effective safety plan, if you will, for immigrant parents or undocumented parents who might fear detention or deportation. This is the one that is for a what-if scenario, but it's entered by the court. And so this is something that is a very effective tool for families who might have a more well-grounded fear of something might happen to them. So people who might already have a deportation order against them, for example, and know that they may be removed from the country imminently, they might want to pursue a standby guardianship before the court. A couple of things to note is that you do have to file a petition and you do have to appear before a judge. So while this is a very effective tool and something that might be recommended for a number of families, we are seeing some hesitation from people, which is certainly understandable, about going to the Daily Center and appearing in front of a judge to explain that they're in fear of immigration proceedings against them and that they'd like to appoint a standby guardian for this reason. But nevertheless, it can be very effective because this person has been essentially pre-screened by the court. So the person that they're looking to appoint is going to have to submit to some basic background checks, so that's something to keep in mind, that they will be screened for both criminal background and for DCFS background. And so the court will run those two checks, and then the court will appoint the guardian, and that makes it much easier for that person to then come back and get plenary guardianship if necessary.
Fantastic. Oh, and you have been watching Green Slate I Incorporated, and tonight we've been discussing immigration concerns and guardianship to put in place in anticipation of changes in America's policy. And tonight I've been joined by Rebecca Rashid Faroki from the Chicago Volunteer Legal Services. And Rebecca, just give a plug for CVLS if you don't mind.
Sure. Chicago Volunteer Legal Services, we're located at 33 North Dearborn, Suite 400. And our main intake line, if you have any civil legal issues, is 312-332-1624. 312-332-1624.
And next week on March 28th, we're going to be, that's going to be our last show, we're going to be discussing how seniors can protect themselves from scams, such as IRS scams or reverse mortgages. And tonight my technician and producer has been Ziff Sistrunk. Thank you, Ziff, and have a good night.
Good night. Thank you.